All right, you guys, guess what? Today you're in for a treat because we're going to talk about money, and this is going to be a very encouraging talk about money for you. Well, I hope that it is today. I know for me, for so many years, when people wanted to talk about money, I felt a lot of shame around it, and like I was just going to hear one more thing that I was doing wrong, or that I just needed to get my spending under more control, or that my fun was going to be taken away. I know there's so many different methods out there. Peter and I heard like the Dave Ramsey method for so long, and we did that, and yes, it works, but it always just felt like I was a kid getting my fun taken away and being told like you shouldn't want these things and you should just be content with what you have and all of that. So today, we're going to talk with Kara Ayala, my very good friend, because she is a master when it comes to money. She also talks marriage and motherhood. She's an awesome mom. She's got a mom of 3 teenagers, and she looks like she's in her 20s. You guys have to go find her on Instagram right now because she's amazing. So welcome to the show, Kara. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you for having me, Joy. I just love everything that you do, and you literally are just joy. So it's awesome.
Aw, thanks for that. So tell everybody, did you used to think about money with shame too? Did you?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes, I did.
Yeah.
And actually, let's just go back to like what you were talking about, because I think that is huge. And like, what is money mindset? You know, like we were talking before the call, like what is money mindset? And really, it's just a set of beliefs that we have around finances. So everybody has a money mindset, whether it's negative or positive or whatever it is. But there is a lot of shame around money. And because people have all these rules and standards of what the world says that you need to do, and then we begin comparing ourselves to other people, which I think is so damaging because we're not our neighbors and we're not our parents. So if we can't separate ourselves from that, like, and see what makes sense for me, and then even talking about the budget. Yes, budgets are good, but we should be in charge of the budget, not the budget controlling us. Like, we're the masters. We decide where that goes, you know? So I like to do like happy budgets, like, you know, when you are doing your budgets, like what kind of a life do I want, you know? But going back to your question about how I used to think about money, I just really thought that some people were blessed with money and some people weren't. Like, that's just the way it was. You were either born with money or you were born with a special gift to make money, and that was it. I didn't understand that everybody has the ability to create wealth.
Correct. And I think that's why I felt so much shame. And even I want to say like hopelessness is because I felt like what you get is what you get. And the kind of job you have, unless you can potentially get a better job or something, it's just kind of what you have. And so I knew that I always liked nice things, wanted nice things, but I always felt like, oh, well, you just somehow don't get that.
Yeah.
And let's throw on top of it, like you should be doing all these other things with your money too.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much pressure on people, and we're never actually really taught proper financial education most of the time from our parents, and in school, absolutely not. Like what did you learn in school about money? How to balance a checkbook?
I learned about the economy, which was pretty much supply and demand, and that was it.
Yeah. And then we're taught to go to school, get a good job, so that we can someday retire. And to me, that's just not appealing. Like, I want to have fun today and not wait until I'm 65.
Correct. And that's what was so hard for me with the Dave Ramsey thing. I'm not here to dog on Dave Ramsey. I'm not. But I didn't love it because it was the whole live now like no one else, so you can live later like no one else. And his point with that was be really cheap and poor right now, even though your friends aren't, so that later, someday, you can hopefully be really like well off when your friends aren't. And for me, I was just always like, but I'll be old by then. Like, young right now.
Yeah, it's so true. And, you know, like going back to Dave Ramsey, he definitely has his place as far as like bad debt. Like, but I think his message about debt is so strong on debt that people just fear debt. Once they get into like his programs, they fear debt altogether. Whereas there's some debt that can actually excel you into amazing things too. So I think it's just all about perspective and asking questions, and really like not being scared to ask those questions. I think there's a lot of fear around money, and people feel nervous and insecure when we talk about money because they don't have the schooling, but if you don't ask questions and you don't start searching, you're not going to ever learn them, right?
So then tell me, you thought at one point in time some people were just blessed and some people didn't. So then what happened that changed your mind?
I think the thing that changed my mind the most is my husband and I both had jobs, and he was working out of town for a long period of time. And we decided we're going to open our own business because, if we're going to spend this much time, we're going to just do it for ourselves. Not really thinking about the financial part, just like wanting to work for ourselves. But then once we opened our business, I realized that we create that. And then it was, definitely a learning process through that. I also remember a time where I couldn't even pay like bills. Like I was always like, we would get in our electric bill and I would wait until the very last minute. I would pay late fees every month and I would wait till the last minute. And I remember finally making a decision that I am not going to live like this anymore. And I just started, which is probably kind of weird, but this really shifted something in my mind. I just started, as soon as the bill would come in the mail, this is back in the day when you'd write checks and some people maybe still write checks, but I'd write the check and I'd mail it out and I'd be like, please God, let there be money in my account. Now I'm not saying like, I obviously had enough money to cover them, like don't go bouncing checks, but I made a decision that I was going to start taking control of my finances and that I was going to be a boss of my finances, because otherwise, I think this is probably the biggest tip that I have for people in shifting their money mindset is to pay yourself first, because otherwise we are paying everyone before ourselves. So we're paying for our groceries, we're paying for our house payment, we're paying for clothes, we're paying for schooling, we're doing all these things, but yet we're not putting anything aside that's going to grow into us. So I think that that's my very first tip, is just to set aside 10% right away in a separate account that's only used for something that's going to bring money back into you.
Correct. So you're talking savings or investing?
Yes, and more investing. So it is a savings, but it's sitting there waiting for opportunities for you. I feel like when you start doing this, your reticular activator starts going. So you start looking for those opportunities. So a lot of times we're just overwhelmed of, well, I don't even know where to invest, or I don't know how it's going to happen. And I think people are limited to thinking they have to have money to invest. And to be honest, like we've invested in a lot of real estate, as you know, but most of our first deals, we didn't have any money. So you don't have to have money. Like a lot of people will carry things for you too, to start making those investments.
So when you say we didn't have any money to invest in the beginning, do you mind giving us an example of what?
Yes.
amounts?
Yes. Our very first property was a single wide trailer. And our friends owned it, and they were like, we just want out of this house. Like we can't do it anymore. And they had a mortgage on it, and they were like, we just want $5,000 and we'll be out. And we barely even had $5,000. Like we had to scrounge it up. I think we even borrowed a little bit of it. And this is after we had opened our business, but that was our first. And then we just took over their mortgage until it was paid off. There's a lot of people in trouble, and you're actually helping them out. So like they say the 3 Ds: death, divorce, and don't want ums. It's how you get into real estate. So if somebody dies and their kids don't want the property, there's an opportunity for you. And this happens every day, right? And then divorce, I know it's like sad, but most of the time they don't want that property anymore if they own it together. And then there's people that are just tired. They're older, and we've gotten a lot of properties that way as well, as, they're tired and they're older and they're ready to like move on.
And then you just rent them out.
And then I rent them out and I get cash flow coming in.
I love that. So is there a place to go to find these properties? You said, because it's happening every day, right? Events every day. Is there a place to go to find these secret ones?
There is. There's not like any secret place. It's like being diligent of, if this is something you want to get into. Like we would just literally look in the newspaper every day and then start talking about it to people. And so then our friends, our family, everybody knew that we were wanting to create passive cash flow in our household. So then somebody would say, hey, I heard that this, and they would let us know. So it's all about like just putting that intention out there as well. But I mean, you can find a realtor that can find them for you as well too.
That's true. Okay. What if people want to do real estate? Where else would you tell them to invest right away? Do you have any other ideas?
I think businesses are great places to invest in because it's something that, especially if it's your own business, like it's pouring into yourself and it's going to keep bringing that return. So I always say like invest in something that you can control somewhat and that's going to bring cash flow into you every month.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that. Okay. So that was step number one, was basically making a decision to invest the money before you do anything else, which I love that, because that's building wealth. That's not just dealing with debt, that's building wealth.
And this isn't savings day, like rainy day savings. This is strictly for investing.
I hate that term, rainy day savings.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I just always have. I'm like, I don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to play when the sun's shining.
Yeah.
Okay. What would you say is step number two?
Step number two is to get financial education. So reading books, listening to podcasts, or listening to books even, and just finding out more information and asking questions. I said earlier, I think we're scared sometimes to ask questions. There's no dumb question. Like there's really not. And if you find the right mentor or person that is talking to you about money, they're not going to make you feel stupid.
Totally. And I would say learn from the people that have what you want.
Yes, that's so good. That's so good.
I learn from the people that build wealth instead of just help with debt.
Yes. Yes. I agree with that.
So you started investing in you guys before you could afford it. I love that. Then what happened?
It just kept going. We had set out to buy 10 single family properties when we first started investing in real estate, because we wanted that when we're 60, that cash flow. Like that was really going to be our retirement. But, just like we were just talking about, like setting that intention out, once you start putting that intention out, things just start, it like literally the next year we bought 2 properties the first year. And then in the second year, we bought a whole trailer park, which is mostly what we invest in now. And it was 72 units. So see how much it grew like in a year. So like, it's just amazing when you set your vision and you just start going in that direction. This is another thing. I think people look at Z, A, B, C, D, and then they look at Z and that's all they can think about. But they forget they got to take B and C and D. Like you have to take all the steps, no matter how small they are. And sometimes you feel like you're not making progress, or setting that 10% aside might not feel like progress at first. But as you're doing it, it's going to start making that progress. You just got to set it in motion,
And I love that it starts with deciding you don't want a small life anymore. It starts with deciding I don't want to live this way anymore. And I think that's where most people get stuck. They're like, oh, I know I don't want to live this way anymore. Like I'm totally tired of it, but nothing changes for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
that is.
Well, I think they're not making any steps towards a direction. So I really, really think, and even, so I have a challenge group right now, and one of the challenges is a money one. And one of them is to pay yourself first. But I gave them 2 other options too, because some people that might overwhelm them to think about investing in money. So other 2 options are, and you set aside either way, you're going to set aside 10%. It can go into yourself. So educating yourself, taking courses, joining masterminds, like doing things to better yourself, like self-education or professional development. And then the other one is giving, because some people think, like actually most people have this negative thing in their minds that money is evil, and that if they have money, it's going to make them bad, or it's going to do something to them. So I like having that challenge for people, because once they see what they can save up and give to, and when they see that they can bless somebody, it shows them that the more I have, the more I can give. So that kind of helps break down that. So I think that setting aside that 10% and either 3 of those things really starts shifting your mind.
And you're telling people to do this when they think they still don't afford it. They still don't have the money for it.
Yes. I guarantee you're not going to notice the 10%. I guarantee it. Like when I first started doing this, like you just don't even notice it. Like you might miss a coffee or something. And I don't even think about it that way, because I'm not going to have my coffee so I can do this. I just set it aside, and you put it in an account that you're not going to touch, and you're not going to look at it. So it just disappears before. I mean, you pay your electric bill and you're not like, where did that money go? You're not even thinking that, you're like, I need electricity. You also need to invest back into yourself.
I love that. Such good tips. Okay. What would you say is the next one after financial education?
I think working on your emotional intelligence,
Ooh, I love that.
because we get so emotional with money and we make decisions based on our emotions, and you cannot. I mean, I'm sure most people have experienced, during this time that we're in right now, have experienced a lot of emotions. And if we make decisions based on our emotions, things go they go to places we don't want them to go. So if we can keep our mind and our emotions in a level place, it just shifts the way that you think about money. That's I don't know. Your
Yeah.
thoughts.
No, tell me more about emotional maturity and what you mean by that term.
So when something comes at you that you can't control, you're not going to be moved by it, because once you start working on like yourself as a person, and that you can have whatever you want, and that so I think a lot of people think that money comes from an outside source, but it really comes from you. So you're providing that value. So no matter what happens, but you have to work on this and you have to get to that point. But I know that no matter what happens, I could get everything that I have today taken away. And tomorrow I would go A, B, C. I would start over, and I know I'd get back to Z, because I just know that that's the way it works. But if you think, oh, it's all taken away, and you just throw your hands up in the air, that's when you're never going to make it, because you're never going to get back up. So I think failing and not letting it affect you is huge.
So emotional maturity to me means not allowing your emotions to rule your actions.
Yes.
Basically, it's not reacting to everything in your life. It's responding.
Yes.
There's a difference there, right? And so
Yes.
many people, I think, as a society, we're not taught how to respond versus react. I think we're actually encouraged to be emotionally stunted. And I think that we are not taught to take responsibility for everything in our lives. And that's a big part of emotional maturity too, right? Is taking 100% responsibility in every area of your life and not playing the victim card. Which so many people I think are like, I don't play the victim card. Oh, but we do. And
we do. We do. And I think too, to be clear, emotional intelligence doesn't mean you don't feel those emotions, or that you don't it hits you and you're give yourself a couple days, but you're not reacting immediately. You're letting it sit, letting it come through, and saying, okay, but is this true? Or how can I get out of this?
You're less offended by other people too, because you can recognize what's their stuff versus yours.
Yes. Yes. It's so huge. It's huge in every aspect of your life, even every aspect.
Yeah.
So
where would you tell people to go to start working on emotional intelligence if they're like, oh my gosh, never thought of that?
I think, I don't know if there's a place to go. There probably is, but I don't know of it. I just have learned to practice when bad things happen, to sit back and journal and say, okay, now what's the worst that's going to happen? Because usually when something hits us, it's bad, but then there's a ripple effect, right? So this is going to create this, this, and this. So I always like to go to the worst case scenario and face it. Just be okay, well, then what am I going to do? Because most of the time the worst case scenario doesn't happen, but then you don't stay there. You come up with a plan and you don't stay in that, give yourself 15 minutes a day to go to the worst case scenario and then move on. And when those thoughts come up that want to say, hey, let's think about that worst case again, maybe tomorrow at 8:00 when that's scheduled in, we can think about that. Take note of it, and then you just go in and you deal with it then.
You know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like you're telling your brain how to work for you rather than letting your brain run you.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right. What about after that? Or do you have a step 4?
So my step 4 has a lot to do with 3. You can't have a poor spirit and be rich. And I think a lot of people have, their spirit is poor, and there's this humble thing about people. They think that if they're poor, there's I don't know, that's some kind of a spiritual thing. There's nothing spiritual about being poor. Nothing. Because you cannot impact people the way that you are designed to impact people when you don't have anything to give them. So I think working on that as well is it's really just rewriting that story and finding out where did these stories come from? Why do I think this? And just going back to did it come from childhood? Is this the way my parents talked about it? Did I learn this in church, the media, you know?
Yeah, I think it's so been portrayed as being poor makes you more godly, or somehow it makes it so that money is not an idol for you. But what I found to be true is that people idolize money whether they're poor or rich.
Yes.
Sometimes people who are poor idolize money way more than rich people do, because they're so like, oh, you just gave me money. Like, oh my gosh, we need to split this down to the penny. Like,
Yeah.
so focused on the lack that I would say that's just as much of an idol as
No.
someone
Yeah.
who's like, oh, all I need is money, 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 right? Like
Yeah.
both sides are completely focused on either that's all they want or that's all they don't have.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yes. Yes. I love that.
All right, take us on next.
Okay, this is the last one. I probably could list these to 20, but we'll do 5. Is being the master. And, you know, like two times, I think on the emotional intelligence, you were saying, you know, this sounds to me like you're being the boss of your mind. You also have to be the master of your finances. You decide. You're in charge of it. Like, you decide where it goes. A lot of times I think our money comes in and we pay everything like I talked about before, but then we also say, oh, look what Susan got. She got that new bag. I probably need that too. Well, you're the master. You can decide that. And there's nothing wrong with going to get that bag if it's in your means. And I think a lot of people, before they get to that place, they try to look like they have wealth before they actually have wealth, which is fine if that's something they want. But if you want true wealth, you're going to have to really do step number 1 and pay yourself first before you start going out and buying all the fancy things that make you feel wealthy, but don't actually produce any wealth.
Ooh, I love that. And that sounds to me a little bit like diving into the victim mindset here. This is where we can pull out a great example of, you're saying be the master of your money instead of pretty much the victim. And I think that when we look like the victim, or we're taking the victim card in our money when it's, well, I only have this much money, so I can only do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Does that sound like a victim? Most people don't even recognize that, but I would say that is kind of a victim mindset, because being the master would say, no, this is the money that I have. This is what I'm deciding to do with it, and I'm going to figure this out.
Yes, exactly. My husband and I always say, if there's something we want, we're like, okay, if we can't afford it, we're like, how can we afford it? Like, start asking better questions. Like, okay, what do we need to do to bring in enough money to afford that? Like, easy. Like, it's so much easier to me to create money than to like try to peel away money. Like, I hate that. I hate that lack feeling of like, oh, well, maybe if we took away this, we could have this. No, let's create something that can provide for that.
But you probably didn't always think that way. You probably didn't always know how to be like, oh, I'll just create it.
No, and I learned that from being, like learning from people like Robert Kiyosaki and other financial people that I read their books and I went to their conferences and I learned from them. So that's all about like the educating yourself. Like, you have to educate yourself. You have to expand your mind and start asking those better questions, because when that question got presented to me, I'm like, oh, yeah, that sounds so much better to me. How do I do that? Like, and then it's really that A-B, like just taking the steps, even though, anything we do in life when we're a beginner, we're not very good at it. And it's like, you don't feel like you're making progress and it's just messy action, right? But after a while, you can see that you've grown and it's been amazing, but it does take that period of time of like wading through it and figuring things out.
Do you have any kind of like guidelines or suggestions for people when they're like, okay, so I can just decide to create some extra money? How do I come up with something to like create some extra money? What can get them thinking outside the box?
That's a really good question. I think that's depends on totally the person. Like, I can't tell you like, oh, do A, B, and C, because everybody's so different. I could tell you for us, our first step was going to work for ourselves. That was our first step. Your first step really you're just trying to bring in other streams of income. So it might be like a network marketing thing, like that's going to bring you in some extra income at first, or it's buying a rental property. Like,
yeah.
Maybe you buy a duplex instead of a 3-bedroom house. Maybe you buy a duplex and you rent out half of it, and it pays for your mortgage. Like, I think it's just getting out of that mindset of that everything is given to you and like, what can I provide? So I think like, especially like in the day and age that we live, we're like, oh, you took this from me, so now what are you going to give me? Like, I don't want anybody in charge of who's providing for me. Like, I don't want the government providing for me whatsoever, because that diminishes my power. That means they can take from me. If they're giving to me, they can take from me. So same with anything in your life. Like, at some point, you're going to have to take charge of a portion of your income, make it something you're controlling and not, your employer. I'm not saying you quit your job or whatever, but like, you have to start branching off and finding other sources. We need more than one stream of income, as we've all realized lately. Our one in stream could be hit like that by the coronavirus.
Totally. Well, I tell people you can't underestimate the power of Google. And Googling ways to get paid online right now. You will discover that you can make money writing for blogs. Like, you can make working as a virtual assistant. So Googling better questions, like, how can I start making money online right now? And then also looking at your life as a whole and looking at like, what skills do you have that you could help someone with a need that they have. Most people don't even pay attention to what other people ask them for. Mm-hmm. What are people asking you for? I guarantee you've had a couple friends ask you for help with one thing, and it's the same thing. If a couple people have asked you for that, and it can be literally 2 people, that is a hint that you can make some extra money doing that thing for people. But people think that it has to be harder than that for some reason.
Yeah, well, they think it has to be like a big business, like what I had just said. Like, they think that it has to be that, but really it's just like finding that value and asking, what does the world need? Like, what do they need that I have? Because you have something. Everybody has something inside of them.
Yeah, totally. I love that. Well, let's dive into identifying where we all are on the map with our money mindset, because that's step number 1, really, or pre to number 1, is always knowing where you are currently so that you can get to where you want to go. And you have these awesome archetypes that help us figure out like where we're at and what we need to work on to get where we want to go.
Awesome. Yeah, let's do it. Okay. So the first one is the Hustler Extraordinaire. So this is a person that's always chasing something. She might be working 2 to 3 jobs or side gigs. I know we just told you like to create another stream of income, but this is a person that's always just, they're scattered everywhere. They might have shiny object syndrome. So they might be doing this network marketing business, but then they hear about this other one that's doing much better, or their friend made more money and they haven't really made any progress. So they jump ship and jump to the next one. And they're just continually looking for the next thing that's going to make them rich. And they're just always jumping around to the next thing.
Okay.
So what she can do immediately, if this resonates with you, is stay put. Sit down and do the thing 100%. Like, I know that seems hard, but like, that's the hardest thing we ever do in life, is to be consistent with something. So be consistent. Like, that's the number 1 thing that she can do, is just put your head down and do the work. Like, I know it sucks. I know that you feel like you're not making progress, but if you just be consistent, you're going to start seeing results.
Yeah. I think we want to not have to give a full 100% and to start getting these awesome results, but you really aren't going to know if this is the right thing or not until you've gone all in and done 100%.
Yes. I love that point too, because, we all think we want a certain amount of money or whatever, but like, you have to become that person. Like, you have to become that person that did the thing. You know what I mean? Like, we have to be, do, and then we have. If you just get, then, most people that just are given $100,000 lose it in a year, or win the lottery, they lose it within a year because they don't know how to keep it. And they go out and take all their friends on vacations, and they don't know how to manage their money. So it's super important to go through that process, as crappy as it is. It's super important.
I love that. Okay, the Hustler Extraordinaire. Got it.
All right. And the next one is your Highness Income Earner. This one I love, because she actually does make a pretty high income. She does really well for herself. But what she's lacking is time freedom. So she probably really likes her career. She's probably really successful at it, but she doesn't have any free time because she's giving it all to her career. She'll probably suffer from major mom guilt if she is a mom because she spends so much time away from her kids. And then she might compensate with her kids by buying them things to make, to compensate for her time. And then she still probably lives paycheck to paycheck though. Even though she makes a lot of money, she's probably still living paycheck to paycheck because she's still trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Woo! I'm all of these. I might be all of them.
Well, I think we all have like a couple of them in us. What this one can do is, I think the first step for her is to really start setting aside that money for the 10% that she's to make it work for her, and explore investing with, privately with other businesses or operators in real estate. There's a lot of operators in real estate that they do everything and you literally just invest passively and you get a check. So that's growing your money, and your money begins working for you, so that at some point, I have a couple friends that they ended up not having to work at their job, but they could still. So they grew their passive income so much that they didn't have to work their job. That gives them time freedom if that's something that they're wanting to desire.
Love that.
All right. Next one is the damsel in denial. This one, she's probably a stay-at-home mom. She could also work a job too, but she leaves all her financial decisions to her partner. So she's not involved at all. She might even get an allowance. He might say, this is how much you can spend for the month or whatever, but she has no clue what's happening in her finances. And she's really blindly leaving her retirement and everything to her husband, or else to her job and whatever 401k that they are providing for her.
Oh my gosh, this was me before I did my network marketing job.
This has been me too. I've been here before a lot. So I think the first step for her would to start financially educating herself, reading books and just learning, and not being scared to ask questions, because she's probably a little more intimidated to ask these questions because she might not feel qualified, but that's how you get qualified.
I think women in this position, because this was true of me, so I'll speak from my thing, is I didn't think I had the smarts. Mm-hmm. I literally was like, I don't get it. I'm not a numbers person, and my husband is such a numbers person, and he was so out there breadwinning, I got this. And when I would even try to ask questions, he would be like, don't worry about it. Let me, and I've told him recently, when he tells me that, he makes me feel like he's saying I'm not smart enough to hear about it.
Yeah.
And that's a good means at all, but yeah, that's what he would do.
Yeah. I think okay, so I think too, just to go with that, because that is probably what a lot of women are feeling and thinking, is to, when you present this to your spouse or whatever, just to present it in the aspect of, I want to know what to do if something happens to you. And if you die tomorrow, I need to know basics. It doesn't mean you're going to go in and you're going to, if he handles all the finances, doesn't mean you're going to sit down with him every week and pay the bills or whatever. Right. But you have a basic understanding, and maybe you schedule a monthly, date of okay, this is where we're at. This is, this is what's going to happen if I do die. You just got to be prepared and know. And I'm not saying you have to be super involved if that's not really your desire, but you should have it. Everybody should have some sort of an understanding of what's happening in their home finances.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
All right. And then the last one is the scarcity in all her splendor.
Ooh.
This is the person where there's never enough. They're probably stingy. They split the check exactly. You go to dinner with them and they're get the calculator out, and they're trying to figure out how to split the check. They're probably always on a budget, but they're never getting ahead, or else they have savings that's massive that is doing absolutely nothing for them. It's just sitting there. So what she can do is to start working on her abundance by rewriting that story and really journaling this out and discovering where did this come from? And are these really my beliefs? Because usually that person, it's been passed down generation to generation or some sort of thing like that. So I think it's extremely important that she really works on rewriting that story. And then she needs to start if she does have that big savings, start exploring ways to make that money work for you. Because you're actually losing money at the rate of our economy right now if you have money in your savings account.
Yep.
Because other people are using your money because the bank's loaning it out to other people. So somebody's making money off of your money, whether you like it or not.
Yes, this is
So
how
you,
I was raised.
yeah,
Yes, this is my mom, like my parents to a T.
yeah, yeah. And then I think another thing this person can do is practice giving, especially if they're like have that stinginess, is just to like create that like a practice within themselves.
Yes, start letting go.
Yep.
Start letting go and like reminding themselves of the abundance that's around them.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think people have a hard time with that because telling themselves like I have plenty of money. I'll use us as an example because our coach told us that the other day. He was coaching my husband, basically saying he needed to tell himself that. And I knew immediately my husband's like, but I don't have enough money. Like, how can I tell myself that I don't?
Yep.
Because he definitely still has like a paycheck to paycheck mentality. And so in his mind, it's like, even though we have residual income, it's like,
Right.
well, no, it's not. Like if we don't get a paycheck, we don't have. And I'm like, but do you see everything around us?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's what he's talking about is you have plenty of money. If this doesn't show up, if something doesn't happen, you won't be on the street tomorrow. Like
Yeah.
you'll
Yeah.
have some space. Like you'll be able to figure it out is the point. Like you're not
Yeah.
going to be on the streets tomorrow.
Yeah, I love that. And it really is a continual process too. Like I still have limiting beliefs in me too that sometimes pop up and I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? Like,
Oh, for sure.
why am I thinking this? Why is this, like you'll feel that fear coming up and you're like, okay, where is this coming from? Like, I think just really stopping when you feel those feelings and being like, where does this come from? And I love that you brought up looking around you because really that is abundance. Like we really only need food, water, and shelter. And most Americans have food, water, and shelter. And so if we can look abundantly at that, that's abundance.
And it's going down the rabbit hole again of like, what's worst case scenario? It's like
Yeah.
you've got an iPhone, like you've got clothes, like
Yes.
you have stuff you
Yes.
could sell, you have skills you could market, like you could get
Yeah.
a good job. Like
Yep.
you're not really going to lose everything, but we have such an emotional fear that feels so real
It
when
does.
it comes to thinking of the money not coming in anymore. Do you
Yeah.
have anything to speak to that as far as like where does that come from? Why is that such a big thing for us?
Well, I think it goes back to like money being our master rather than us being money's master, honestly. When you let money control you, it's gonna lead you down paths like that of that fear and scarcity. But when you're in charge and you know that like you can control it and you just like you take that stand, I feel like it shifts that perspective of like, no, you're not gonna tell me what's happening. I decide. I'm in charge. Like I can go and everybody has skills and everybody, like you were saying earlier, we all have skills and we all have opportunities around us. Like you were saying with your husband, even like he could probably go get a job
Yeah.
anywhere tomorrow if something happened to his income now. Like really.
Yes. Literally.
So
Literally could.
yeah. So I think it's just like taking it into our own mind and becoming the master of
Yeah.
that.
And again, I think it's like you said, that's generationally passed down. It's this generational fear, and it's this, for some of us, childhood fear coming from what we grew up in or without, or things like that, and having to remind that kid inside of us that we're not in that place anymore.
Yeah. And knowing that God's our provider, like that's huge for me. I don't know how to teach this without like, you have to rely on something bigger than yourself too, because when things are a little bit shifty, you can be like, you know what? I know this doesn't look perfect right now, but I know that I have always been provided for. That doesn't mean I always have all the wants I want, but I know my needs are always met.
When was the like hardest time for you to trust in God for that? Or what was the biggest thing?
I have a lot of them. Let me think about the biggest. I think I talked on your podcast before about when my son was in the hospital. He was 2 months old and we had to take a month off because we had to go to a hospital that was 3 hours away. So we had to take a month off of work and we had no money coming in. I was just like, I don't know how we're going to, and our bills were just stacking up, and we had these huge medical bills. We did have insurance, but our medical bills were still like, probably took us 5 years to end up paying. Like we'd pay like $10 a month. Like that's how. And I think just knowing that like what really matters, what's really important, and putting our focus more on our family and like what's important, and then being integrous with what we could do. So even though our bill was like 20 grand and we made $12 an hour, we were like, we can pay you $25 a month. And we continued to do that, like and that was a lot at that point, like $25 was a lot. But I think like being integrous in that taught us to, like, I don't know, like you reap what you sow. So no matter what your bills are or what it is, like, I think that comes back to you too. So like just being integrous and doing what you can with what you have.
Yeah, being honest, even with the creditors.
Yes.
But so many of us hide out in fear because we're like, but I can't pay the bill. Like, and then we wonder why we keep staying in the same place. And it's like,
yeah, and
they'll work with you.
They will. And I love that, because that goes back to the whole fear thing. Like, we're fearful, like that fear comes on us, that like, or we're scared to ask, and really people are willing to work with people if we're just honest and upfront.
Mm-hmm. So it's always a good idea to ask yourself, am I operating out of fear or love right now?
Yes.
Because it's like, I'll catch myself. Oh,
yes.
This decision is not based in love right now. This decision is definitely based in fear.
Yeah. I have one more crazy story of when we faced a lot of fear. When 2007, our business, a company that owed us, I won't go into the whole story, but a company owed us like $300,000. And we were really relying on that cash flow. We had just like hired all these new people. Our business was probably the top of its game at that point, and we had just been in growth mode, and they went bankrupt and owed us $300,000. And we were just like, we had no idea what was going to happen. And we had to make cuts in our company, and we had to, go to our vendors and say, hey, we owe you a lot of money, but can you work with us? That same thing of just being humble and like, hey, this is where we're at and there's nothing we can do about it. And then just trusting that no matter what, if we lost our business, because it was at that point where we could have lost it at that point, that it would be okay because we had each other, and just focusing on your family and like what really matters.
Totally. Wow. That's amazing. Now, I know it's 2020 and we're going through the coronavirus and everything. You guys just went through a big thing with your company with the virus and all of that.
Yeah.
How has that been as far as trusting your faith now and all of that?
Yes. Actually, I have a little timer on my phone that reminds me of that story I just told you when our company went through that, like to revisit that little Kara, because like we made it through it, and that's really what matters. We prepared for like really, really bad, because we didn't know. We own a lot of rental properties, and we didn't know if people were going to be paying rent, but we actually have not had to. The only thing we've really had to shut down is our construction company, because they travel around, and there's just, with all the lockdowns and stuff, that's just not happening. So that was at first, it was probably the first 4 weeks was very uncertain, but I think just knowing that I've never been without, and I know that we have gifts inside of us that we could start over if we needed to, has been the biggest thing for us. It's just like trusting and knowing that we're provided for no matter what.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for your tips today. I love your descriptions of the different ladies and where we're at and what we can start doing right now to get to where we want to go. Tell everybody about what you do to help people with all of that.
Yeah, so I do 6-week group coaching with women. So we do 6 weeks, and we go through your money story. The first 2 weeks are all about like your money story, and we really dig deep into what that story was, and then we rewrite it so that it's a better, more positive story. And then the second 2 weeks is all about how money works in our system, like what are the rules of money, and then the last 2 weeks is how to get money to work for you. So instead of you trading your time for money, you begin making your money work for you. So that's how it works. So I gave you all those archetypes, but this is the archetype we want to be in. It's the abundantly affluent one. Ooh. She prioritizes herself, her relationships, her time, her value, and she doesn't chase money, and money works for her, and she is a boss. Mm-hmm. So that's the place we all want to be.
That sounds amazing. Sounds like she's got the dream life for sure.
Yes.
So if people wanted to educate themselves on money, it sounds like they should totally come to you and do your course. Is this course just for working women, or would you say it's good for stay-at-home moms too?
Yeah, I've had both. I've had working women, I've had stay-at-home moms. So yeah, what if you're feel like calling in your heart right now? Like I definitely call or actually, so I have my on my Instagram page, there's a link in there that you can apply for it because it's a smaller group. So there's like 10 people max in there. So yeah, it starts in August 16th.
Yay. I'll be sure to link up your Instagram handle in the show notes. So
Awesome.
thank you for all of your tips and for allowing women to feel a little bit more empowered when it comes to money today, and less shame around it and more hope. Honestly, I think that's what we all need more of when it comes to money, is just more hope. And
Yes.
that's like shame. You're screwing up again. So
Yes,
thank
I
you.
agree. Thank you for having me. I always love our conversations, and you just provide such a good environment, and it's so easy to chat with you.
Yay. All right. With that, everybody have an awesome day. Don't forget to take a screenshot of this episode, share it out in your stories, and tag both of us. We would love to hear which archetype are you. You can tell us. It'll be super fun to have that conversation going. Thanks, everybody.